If there's one thing that the Gone series is plentiful in, even more so than mutants and monsters, it's death. And to be honest, given all of the different dangers within the 20-mile universe of the FAYZ, I'm surprised that any kids made it out of there at all. But alas, a lot did actually make it out, a surprising amount given everything that happened in there. But while we obviously know that a lot of kids did escape the FAYZ, the majority in fact, we also know that a lot didn't. Out of the 332 children that were locked inside the FAYZ barrier at the beginning of the story, 136 of them met their ends at some point during the series. And the causes of these deaths spanned everything from starvation to suicide to being eaten by talking coyotes. Yeah, welcome to the Gone series. And welcome to the first video in a series in which I will go over every single death that I can figure out happened within the series from Gone all the way through to the ending of Light. And don't worry, I'll also be doing the Monster Trilogy after it as well. In these videos, I'll be going over every single death in the series and telling you guys exactly what happened to the kids who never made it out of the FAYZ. From the noble sacrifices of the heroes of the FAYZ and the deaths that marked historic moments in the history of the Dome, to the satisfying defeats of the villains and monsters that threaten the children of the FAYZ, and of course, the deaths of the children whose names were forgotten the moment their hearts stopped beating. Now, having the exact number of kids that died within the FAYZ is a very, very useful bit of information to have. Mainly due to the fact that a lot of the time when it's more than just one person dying, Grant is actually quite vague on how many people die in group killings or mass slaughters. Now, first of all, I'd like to clarify that that is not me being nitpicky about Michael Grant's writing style, because telling us exactly how many kids died in every single event, being like, oh, during this group that was ruthlessly slaughtered, 2 of them were females, 5 of them were males, 2 of them were over the age of 14, like, no one wants to read that. So I'm not saying it's a bad thing that there are some times that we're not told how many kids died. I'm just saying that it makes it a little difficult for people like me that are making these videos. And I'm sure some of you may be wondering, did I reread the entire series to make these videos? And the answer is yes. Yes, I did. Although I would like to clarify, I did not reread the series just to make these videos. I was rereading the series, and I decided to write down all the deaths that happened so that I could make these videos. Now, on the Gone Wiki, there is actually a page just dedicated to deaths, which is actually quite useful for me. Unfortunately, only characters that were named in the books are on that page. And there were quite a few that weren't. And not to mention that before making this video, I actually went and I had a look at the deaths page, and there was actually some information on there that was already inaccurate. And we're only on the first book, so I'm definitely going to be rereading sections of the books to compare information with what's on the wiki and what I have in my notes as we go on through this series. Now, luckily in Gone, there isn't actually a lot of ambiguity, and the deaths are actually pretty clean cut. But in the future books, when there's more ambiguity and there are like groups of people, and Grant never really tells us exactly how many people died in all of these groups, then what I'm just gonna do is I'm gonna look at the future books and just try and figure out and make a guesstimate at how many kids died in each of these little groups that Grant never told us about. In short, I'm gonna try my best. I guarantee you that I will probably make some mistakes at some point. Not to mention that a few minutes ago I said that the total amount of people in the FAYZ was 332. And I got that number by adding up the number of deaths and the number of people still alive. But then again, I'm not sure that actually counts for people that weren't in the FAYZ at the start, like Gaia and Alex. And I'm also not sure that within that 136 deaths are counted the deaths of 2 people that died and then came back. Those of you who have read the books know exactly who I'm talking about. So in short, I'm going to try my best with the information that I have on hand to give you guys an accurate series depicting all of the deaths within the series. If you're a fan of the Gone series, or if you want to learn more about it, then make sure to go into the description or to the pinned comment down below and join the Gone unofficial Discord. And without further ado, sit back, relax, and enjoy as I go over all of the deaths from Gone. Now, in comparison to the rest of the series, Gone is actually pretty tame when it comes to deaths. Tame is in the quantity of the deaths spread throughout the book and the causes of them in comparison to the causes in the other books. But I have to say that the deaths in this one are nothing to laugh about, and to be honest, I actually think that the deaths in Gone are the saddest in the series. And the reason for that is that the deaths in Gone, for the most part, are actually not that insane. Compared to what happens in the later books, the deaths in Gone are actually relatively normal. And the reason I think these deaths are the saddest is because they lack the sort of fantasy, sci-fi, horror aspect that most of the deaths in the future books actually have. They're sad because they don't have that sort of fantasy horror aspect to distract you from the fact that these are kids that are dying. So be warned, because the deaths in this series are definitely not for those who get easily upset. And of course, this sort of goes without saying, but these videos will obviously contain spoilers, so you know. Now, with all that out of the way, let's get into it. Now, it is revealed in later books that more people actually died in Gone that was revealed in Gone. Mostly being people on the outside of the FAYZ barrier. But those deaths are not going to go on this list because this list is all deaths that happened in Gone, not deaths that happened during the time of Gone. And that is a rule that is going to stay in place for the rest of the series. If there was a death that happened within the events of Gone but was mentioned in, I don't know, Plague, then that death will be in the video on the deaths in Plague. So with that said, the very first death in the Gone series was a little girl simply known as the Firestarter. She literally doesn't even have a name because we don't know her name. She was literally unidentifiable by the time they actually got a good look at her. Near the beginning of the book, pretty much right after the FAYZ wall goes up, the remaining kids discover that an apartment block is on fire. And from within the burning building, they can hear the screams of a little girl, and of course, our boy Sam Temple jumps in to save her. Of course, Sam didn't anticipate the fact that the fire was actually started by the little girl, as this little girl was actually also one of the book's first mutants. The little girl had the ability to spew liquid fire from her hands, and of course, when you pair that with a frightened little girl whose parents randomly disappeared, yeah, that's not a good combination. Now, the exact reason for this little girl's death is actually a little unclear. Because what actually happens is that the little girl goes to fire her fire at Sam, unintentionally probably, because he's wearing a mask to save himself from the smoke, and he probably looks like a fucking monster. But Sam, in his panic, accidentally uses his own power. Now, this isn't the killing laser beams that he gains access to later in the book, it's just a flash of light. But after that flash of light happens, the girl seemingly just drops unconscious, and by the time Sam has gotten her outside and to safety, she's apparently dead. If I had to make a guess on why exactly it was that she died, I'd say it was probably a combination of smoke inhalation combined with her going unconscious from the shock of seeing Sam's light. I don't think it was Sam's light that actually killed her. Basically, I think that she had a lot of smoke in her lungs, and obviously when she went unconscious, all that smoke stayed in her lungs, and she wasn't able to, you know, like, cough it out, and, you know, she died. She was probably pretty badly burned as well, so that probably added to it. But the first death in the FAYZ was just a frightened little girl who didn't know how to control her own powers, and she, of course, was the first to be buried in the Perdido Beach graveyard, which would continue to grow as the series goes on. Now, the second death in Gone is definitely one of the saddest and honestly one of the most horrible deaths to ever happen in the series. And that was the death of Bouncing Betty, a girl who never did anything wrong to anyone. Now, Betty was seen for the first couple of chapters, and honestly, like I said, she was just a happy little girl that never did anything bad to anyone. Unfortunately, the thing that would condemn her to death within the FAYZ very early on would be the fact that she too had powers. Her death occurred after Kane, Drake, and the rest of the Coach crew had come down from Coach Academy and established law within Perdido Beach. Now, while it was never actually stated, I think that given that the Coach kids knew about the powers before the Perdido Beach kids did, that Kane told Drake, and Drake, by extension, told everyone that was working under him, that if anyone were to exhibit anything that resembled powers, that they were to be dealt with. And unfortunately, the people working under Drake included Orc. Now, Orc was a character that had one hell of a redemption arc throughout the entirety of the Gone series, but unfortunately at this point, he was nothing more than a bully, and unfortunately at this point he was about to become even more than that. Now, it was never explained in detail what Betty's power actually was. The only thing that we were really given is that what she was doing was creating little balls of light. And from that we can assume anything. It could be that she was actually the same as Sam, but just less powerful, or it could just be that her power was something completely different. Unfortunately, she decided to demonstrate whatever powers it was that she had in the presence of Orc, and Orc punished her by hitting her in the head with a baseball bat. Now, the fact that Betty was hit in the head with a metal baseball bat is actually only half of what makes her death so horrifying. The other half is that after the exterior wound is patched up, it seems as though she's going to be okay. Unfortunately, that is the furthest possible thing from the truth. Because a few hours later, Betty staggers into the hospital, barely being able to even speak. And I don't think I need to tell you guys what happened, but I will anyway, in that the hit from Orc actually caused internal bleeding inside her head. And unfortunately, this was at a time when Lana hadn't made her way to Perdido Beach yet. Meaning, there was nothing that could be done. And so, Betty became the second person to be buried within the Perdido Beach graveyard, and honestly, she's one of the most tragic deaths of the series. Moving on to the third death, we have a death that is potentially even more horrible than Betty's, and that is the death of an infant boy. After Kane and the Coach crew turn up to Perdido Beach and establish order, Kane sends Sam and a couple of others around to all of the houses on the outskirts of town in order to make sure that all of the houses don't have any of the stoves or the lights left on. And unfortunately, within this house, they find a little bit more than just a stove left on. There's nothing much else I need to say about this death, to be honest. The poor kid probably just died of starvation, given at this point that I believe it was actually 8 days since the FAYZ wall went up and all of the adults disappeared. And Sam, of course, was the brave soul to do what no one else was willing to, and gathered the remains of the young boy to bring back to the plaza to be buried. Another tragic death, and a horrible one just because it's so normal. Now, all of these deaths pretty much happen within the first half of the book, but after that, we actually don't get any more deaths for a very long time. Being the first book in the series, Gone is obviously focused more on the initial events and the first few days of the FAYZ, rather than trying to show us that this is a horrible place where a bunch of kids die. However, at the very end of the first book, we get the first major battle, known throughout the series as the Thanksgiving Battle. And I say battle, I'd say slaughter was probably a more accurate term. This is the battle in which Kane and Drake with his brand new whip hand that transforms him into my favorite character, join forces with pack leader and the entirety of the Coyote pack to attack Perdido Beach. There are some really memorable moments in this battle, including what I'm pretty sure is the only one-on-one fight between the two four-bars of the FAYZ, Sam and Cain, as well as the legendary battle between Orc and Drake being one of the only battles throughout the series that Drake was unable to win. But of course, what we're concerned about in this video is the deaths. And in this Thanksgiving battle, there were quite a few. In total, 16 kids were killed in the events of the Thanksgiving battle, only one of which we actually know the identity of. And that was actually Tanner. Not an important character by himself per se, but an important character given who he was the younger brother of. So within the Thanksgiving battle, Tanner and 15 other unknown kids were killed. It seems that the majority of them, if not all of them, were killed by the coyotes, but I wouldn't bet against Drake probably having a hand in a few of the deaths as well. Now, at the end of the book, Sam makes a statement which makes the entirety of Gone a very easy book to quantify the deaths of. And it's this statement that actually seemingly caused the confusion on the deaths page on the wiki that I told you guys about earlier. Because before the Thanksgiving feast occurs, after the Thanksgiving battle, Sam says that there are 19 kids now buried in the Plaza graveyard. Now, I initially understood this as 19 kids died in the Thanksgiving battle, but that, of course, is not the case. Because let's be honest, Sam would definitely not just forget about Betty, the fire starter, and the little boy that he found in the house. So he's talking about all of the kids buried in the graveyard, which means obviously you have the fire starter, you have Betty, you have the boy, you have Tanner, and of course that means that there were 15 others. So ladies and gentlemen, those were the deaths in Gone. As I just said, out of the 136 kids that died within the year or so the FAYZ war was up, 19 of them died in Gone. Now, what I also want to do for these videos is actually talk about significant deaths within each book. Meaning, of course, deaths of main characters, or if there aren't any in the books, deaths that left a lasting impact on certain characters or the FAYZ in general. Now, obviously, this was the beginning of the series, so Grant obviously wasn't going to just kill off any main characters in the very first book. But I would like to draw particular attention to two in particular, and that would be Betty and Tanner. Now, Betty's death is significant for a number of reasons. On the wiki, it actually says that Betty's death was the first murder of the FAYZ, but that's just not accurate, because it is stated multiple times within the series that Orc did not intend to kill her, which obviously makes it manslaughter. But Betty's death is very significant to sort of everyone in the first book, but the one person it has a lasting impact on is obviously Orc. Because Orc was originally just a brutish bully that basically no one liked, but the moment that Betty died, he was far more than that. That was the moment that Orc really became a monster, and that was even before his mutation kicked in. And it was actually Betty's death that led to Orc becoming an alcoholic, which led to a lot of problems in the future books, including Drake's escape in Plague. But apart from Orc, most people seem to just forget about Betty as the months went on, and to be honest, that's not really surprising considering the Plaza graveyard in Perdido Beach just kept getting bigger. But believe it or not, there was actually something positive that came from Betty's death, and that was actually the beginning of the greatest love story the FAYZ would ever know. Because directly after Betty's funeral was the moment where Sam and Astrid kissed for the very first time. And it was the two of them that held the FAYZ together during the last few weeks before the barrier finally came down. A bit of a morbid thought to think where that love story started out, but still, I guess it's a positive. Moving on to Tanner, as I said before, Tanner by himself is not really that significant of a character. But of course, the reason his death is significant is because of who he was related to. Brittany. And if I remember correctly, it was Tanner's death that caused Brittany to volunteer as one of Adelio's soldiers, which of course set her on the path to becoming one of the Gaiaphaj's immortal servants. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is I think all I've got to say about the deaths in Gone. Within Gone, there were 19 deaths in total, including 2 boys, 2 girls, and 15 other kids of unknown gender. Join me next time for all the deaths in Hunger, where the true horrors of the FAYZ begin to emerge. I really hope you did enjoy this video. If you did, make sure to leave a like, leave a comment, subscribe if you want to see more stuff from me, and if you like the Gone series or are interested in learning about it, then go down into the description or to the pinned comment down below and join the Gone unofficial Discord. So thanks a lot for watching, everyone, and I will see you on another video very, very soon. Goodbye, everyone.